The market stank of grease, sweat, and hopeless dreams. Every step echoed on the metal floor, surrounded by broken signs and flickering lights. People pushed past each other, shouting prices, arguing, trading things no one should trade. In the middle of all this noise, a small alien girl stood alone, her eyes gray and unfocused. She wore no shoes, and her clothes were torn at the edges. Her hands moved slowly through the air, feeling shapes, touching walls, avoiding sharp turns. She was blind, and no one cared. A tall human watched from behind a food stall. His name was Jace. He was an old tech scavenger, carrying a bag full of parts he wasn't supposed to have. He had scars on his arms, grease under his nails, and secrets in his eyes. He wasn't supposed to be here either, but something about the blind alien girl made him stop. She reached toward a glowing crystal hanging from a shop sign. Her fingers trembled near the light, never touching it. A group of alien boys laughed nearby. Throwing stones at her feet, she didn't react. She just stood there, her hands still in the air, as if trying to touch a dream. Jace's jaw clenched. He hated cruelty, even more when it was done to the weak. He pushed through the crowd, grabbed 2 nutrient bars from his bag, and walked up to her. "Hey," he said quietly, "you hungry?" She flinched, backing away. "I don't beg," she said, her voice soft but proud. Jace smiled. "I didn't say you were," he replied. Placing the food near her hand, she hesitated, then touched the bar, feeling its shape. "You're not from here," she whispered. Jace chuckled. "Neither are you." Her name was Niari. She had been born blind, left at the market years ago, raised by garbage and scraps. She told him how she dreamed of colors, even if she had never seen them, how she felt warmth from lights but didn't know what fire looked like, how she could hear laughter but never see faces. Jace felt something heavy in his chest. He looked down at his bag. The stolen prototype tucked deep inside. It was an unfinished visor, built to restore sight through neural sync. It had never been tested, and worse, it had been banned. But Jace couldn't forget her hands reaching for the crystal light. Couldn't forget the way the world ignored her. They sat in silence in a narrow alley behind the stalls. Night was falling, and the shadows grew longer. Jace handed her a clean cloth and some water. "You trust strangers?" he asked. She smiled. "I trust silence more than noise." Jace knew this moment would change everything. He opened his bag slowly, pulled out the thin black visor, and held it in his hands. The surface glowed faintly, ready to activate. "This is illegal," he said. "If I put this on you, they might come for both of us." Niari tilted her head. "Who is they?" "The ones who never let people like you see," he answered. Niari reached out. Touching the visor, her fingers moved over the smooth surface, feeling the power beneath it. "I want to see the stars," she whispered. Jace looked up at the night sky, the stars barely visible above the neon glow. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he lifted the visor gently and placed it over her eyes. It hummed softly, syncing with her brainwaves. Her body tensed, lips parting as if something burned through her mind. Then she gasped. Light exploded. In her vision, blurry shapes, strange movements, color without names. She saw the flicker of lights, the shimmer of glass, the outline of Jace's face. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she began to laugh and cry at the same time. "I can see," she said again and again, like she was trying to believe it. Jace smiled. But his smile faded as his cum buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his blood ran cold. "Warning. Prototype for 7A activated location. Sector 9 Market Zone Recovery Unit alerted, enforcers deployed." He turned the device off and stuffed it back in his pocket. His mind raced, heart pounding. "They're coming." He whispered. Niari looked at him, her new eyes full of light. "Not fear. Let them," she said softly. "I'm not hiding anymore." But Jace knew what was coming, soldiers with no mercy. And they weren't coming for the visor, they were coming for them. The alley was cold when Niari woke up. She touched the ground beneath her, still not sure if everything she saw last night was real. The visor was still on her head, humming softly. Light spilled into the alley from a nearby neon sign. She turned her head slowly, blinking again and again. Shapes, color, movement, tit was all there. The world wasn't just sound and smell anymore. Now she saw the purple wires hanging from a broken wall, the blue stains on a rusted pipe. She gasped as a small insect with shining wings flew past her face. Her hands shot up to catch it, laughing as it danced away. "I can see," she whispered again, touching the visor. "I really can." Behind her, Jace was watching quietly. Leaning against a wall, he hadn't slept all night the moment the visor activated. His ID was flagged across half the galaxy he had once. Worked for the Galactic Tech Division, but now he was a fugitive, and the visor he gave Niari. It was banned, unstable, and dangerous. But as he watched her smile at a puddle reflecting light, he didn't regret it. Niari turned to him, her eyes wide. "Jace," she said softly, "what's that?" She pointed toward a piece of broken glass that reflected the sky. "That's your first mirror," he smiled. "That's you." She moved closer and knelt down. Staring at her reflection, she blinked several times, then reached up to touch her own face. "I look strange," she said with a shy laugh. "You look alive," Jace replied, crossing his arms. But the peaceful moment didn't last. Suddenly, Jace's wrist device beeped sharply. A small red light flashed on the screen for enforcer units deployed. "Order, recover, or terminate," he cursed under his breath. Pulling Niari back behind a broken crate, "They're tracking the visor." He muttered, "We need to move." Niari looked confused, her voice trembling. "Who's coming?" "Soldiers," he said quickly. "4 of them, trained to kill, far above, in orbit." A silent ship hovered behind the moon, inside. For elite enforcers suited a peach, one built with cybernetic upgrades and neural targeting, their names were Rek, Luthamezan, and Core. Cold, fast, and brutal. They didn't ask questions. They followed orders. "Target is in Sector 9, Rek said, as he loaded his rifle. "Human engineer with banned tech." "What about the girl?" Lutha asked. Rek replied coldly, "If she wears the visor, she's tagged as a threat." "Understood," said Mezen, slamming his helmet down. They launched in silence, back in the alley. Jace pulled a thin cloak over Niari and handed her an old backpack. "Put these inside," he said, passing her food packs, water capsules, and old tools. She nodded, her hands shaking but steady. She wasn't the same girl from yesterday. Now she could move through the world without reaching blindly. But she could feel something else to fear. They moved through back alleys, avoiding cameras. Jace took her to a locked gate behind a burned building. He entered a code, and the metal door hissed open, revealing a long tunnel beneath the city. "What is this place?" Niari asked. "Old sewage tunnels." Jace replied, "No signals get through down here." She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing softly. Darkness surrounded them. But this time she could see the outlines of pipes and walls. Still, she felt something watching them, something that wasn't just a camera or drone. She looked over her shoulder, and for the first time in her life, she saw movement in the shadows. Not just heard it, saw it. "Jace," she whispered. "We're being followed." Jace froze, then slowly turned around. A faint green light blinked from the far wall. "Damn," he muttered. "They dropped a scout drone." He pulled out a small jammer and threw it down the tunnel. It exploded with a pop of static, and the drone's light vanished. "Come on," he said, grabbing her hand. "They'll know we're down here now." They ran through rusted tunnels and steam vents. Jace stopped only once to tear off a panel and rip out a glowing blue cable. "What are you doing?" asked, making sure they can't track us anymore, he said, attaching the cable to the visor. She gasped. "You're making it stronger." "Smarter," he corrected. "It'll now hide its own signal." The tunnel ended in a wide chamber with an old ladder leading up. Jace looked up, listening. Then climbed first. Niari followed, heart pounding. They emerged into the ruins of an abandoned transport station. Wind howled through the broken roof, stars shining above Jace. She whispered, "I saw them. I saw the soldiers." He turned quickly. "Where?" She pointed to a rooftop across the road. Black shapes, tall and armored. Scanning the area, "They're here," she said, her voice calm but cold. "They're hunting us." Jace nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure they never catch us." The moon above Sector 9 was cracked and glowing red, like a warning light watching from the sky. Inside the broken buildings, the streets looked empty. But nothing was quiet. Not tonight, because the signal had gone out. And now, 4 soldiers. "We're coming." Rek walked in front, tall and silent, with red cybernetic eyes that scanned every shadow. Beside him, Lutha moved like smoke, her body upgraded for speed and silence. Mezin carried a drone hive on his back, with insect-like machines buzzing under the surface. Kor was the strongest, his arms made of alloy muscle, his hands large enough to crush stone. They weren't ordinary soldiers. They were built for enforcement. And when the visor activated, their orders were simple. "Recover or destroy. Target confirmed," Rek said. His voice like gravel over metal. Prototype visor. 47A pinged near a transport station in Sector 9. Lutha checked her scanner. Civilian heat signatures. 1 human male, 1 unknown female. Mezin opened a small compartment on his wrist, and tiny drones flew out. "They won't hide for long," he said with a grin. Kor slammed his fists together. "Let's end it fast." Below them, in the shadows of the old station, Jace held his breath. Niari sat beside him, her hands gripping the edges of her cloak. She could see them, those 4 shadows, moving across the rooftops like hunting dogs. Her eyes were still adjusting to this new world, but even with limited vision, she knew one thing. They were dangerous. "We need to move," she whispered. Jace shook his head. "No, not yet." He tapped on a small screen showing flickering red dots, soldier positions. "I built this place years ago when I worked here," he said. "It still listens to me." He pressed a button, and the floor beneath them began to shift. A hidden tunnel opened, leading deeper under the station. "Where does it go?" Niari asked. "Somewhere safe," Jay said, grabbing his bag and helping her up. But just as they dropped into the tunnel, one of Mezin's drones spotted movement. Alert triggered. Mezin smiled. "Got them." Rek raised his hand. "No mistakes. No witnesses." Kor cracked his knuckles. "Let's break them." The chase had begun. Jace and Niari moved quickly through the narrow underground path. The tunnel was filled with old lights, dusty screens, and tangled wires. Jace moved like he had walked these halls before because he had. "I worked here during the first AI rebellion," he said as they ran. "This was my safe zone, above." The soldiers stormed the station. They moved in silence, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every wall. Lutha split from the group, jumping across beams and broken supports. Mezin sent more drones underground. Slithering through air vents and pipes, Rek followed Nairi's heat trail like a ghost. And Kor stayed behind, planting something explosive by the main tower. "They're splitting up," Niari whispered. "I saw one above us." Jay stopped, opened a hidden panel, and pulled out an old shock rifle. "Then we split too," he said, handing her a small device. "A flare beacon," he explained. "If you're in danger, throw it and run the other way." Niari looked scared, but nodded. "I'm not going back to blindness," she said. And I'm not letting you die alone. They moved through separate passages. Jace headed toward the generator room, hoping to cut power and scramble the trackers. Nyari moved toward an old watchtower, trying to get above ground and see more. But Mezen's drones were fast. Two of them caught Nyari near a stairwell, buzzing around her face. Flashing red, she threw the beacon, and it exploded with blinding light, frying the drones. But now her position was exposed. Rek heard the blast and turned immediately. "She's there," he said, sprinting with silent steps. Lutha was already above, waiting for the girl. As Nyari ran up the tower steps, Lutha landed in front of her like a ghost from the sky. "Give me the visor," she said calmly. Nyari shook her head. "No." Lutha stepped closer. "Then I'll take it," before she could. The stairwell exploded from below. Jace had arrived, using an old explosive he'd rigged from broken mining gear. The blast knocked Lutha off balance, and Nyari kicked her hard in the side. Together, they ran back into the smoke. "Why didn't you leave me?" she asked as they fled. "Because you're not just a girl with a visor," he said. "You're the reason I built it in the first place." Far behind them, Rek and the others regrouped. Still alive, Mezen growled. Kor nodded. "There? Smarter than we thought." Rek looked at the sky, then at the ruined station. "Then we burned the whole sector," he said coldly. All of Sector 9 reduced to ash. Back in the tunnels, Jace leaned against the wall. Bleeding slightly, Nyari held him up, her eyes wide. "They're going to destroy everything," she whispered. Jace smiled weakly. "Then we give them something they can't destroy." He opened his bag, pulling out more parts-old memory chips. A cracked AI core, a power cell. "What are you doing?" Nyari asked. He looked at her, fire in his eyes, building a weapon. The sun never reached the junkyard. It was buried under metal towers, broken shuttles, shattered screens, and forgotten machines. A graveyard of old wars, where dead tech lay in rust and silence. But to Jace, it was home, and now it was going to be a trap. Nyari stared at the place as they stepped through a hidden service door. "What is this place?" she asked, pulling her cloak tighter. "My old workshop," Jace replied, looking around. "This is where I fixed drones, reprogrammed bots, and hid things I wasn't allowed to keep." The junkyard was huge, like a metal city with no sky. Everywhere she looked, she saw towers of scrap rising like buildings. Old mech suits leaned against the walls, their eyes dark and lifeless, but Jace's mind was racing. He led her into a small bunker hidden beneath a pile of satellite dishes. Inside, dusty lights flickered as old systems came back online. He plugged in his tools, laid out chips and wires, and pulled out the visor's core. "They're going to destroy this entire sector to get it back," he said. "So we make them regret coming." Nyari watched him move with purpose. Even with a bandage around his ribs and sweat on his brow, he didn't stop. She wanted to help, but didn't know how, until she noticed a blinking console in the corner. "What's this?" she asked. Jace looked up and grinned. "That's the memory hub for the old warpets. Can they work?" "If we wake them right," he said, "they'll remember me." While Jace prepared EMP grenades and rewired shock mines, Nyari stood before the console. She placed her hands on the glass, her visor scanning the code. She didn't understand much, but she understood feeling forgotten. So she spoke to the machines like they were friends. "You were left behind like I was," she whispered, "but today, you have a purpose." She pressed enter. And across the junkyard, old eyes began to glow, one by one. The machines awakened slowly, clumsily, but with power. Tall, armored bots with scratched paint and missing limbs stood again. Their minds connected to the hub, and they saw one face. Jace, their old engineer. "Welcome back," Jace said. With a tired smile, "Your mission is simple: protect the girl." The bots turned and formed a perimeter, their old weapons activating. Jace tossed Inyari a small device. If anything goes wrong, press this. What does it do? It wakes everything. Just then, an explosion rocked the junkyard wall. Dust and metal flew through the air, and a cold voice echoed from the shadows. "You stole government tech," Rex shouted, stepping into the open. "We take it back now." Behind him, Lutha and Mezin moved like shadows. Kor walked slowly, cracking his neck. They didn't wait for warning. They opened fire, laser blasts tore through the air. But the old warbats responded. Giant arms swung. With power, deflecting shots and smashing through metal. Two bots exploded instantly, too old to withstand direct hits. But the others fought with brutal strength. Jace ducked behind a wall, throwing EMP charges that disabled 3 of Mezin's. Drone's Nyari hid behind an engine block, her heart pounding as she watched the chaos. Then she saw Lutha climbing above, moving to flank Jace without thinking. Nyari grabbed a flash grenade and ran toward her. She slid under a broken wing, popped the grenade, and threw it right into Lutha's path. The explosion of light blinded Lutha, making her stumble and fall. Nyari jumped over her and ran back to Jace. "I got her," she said. Out of breath, Jace stared at her. Amazed. "You're getting scary," he said with a smile, but Mezin wasn't done. He launched a sonic pulse from his arm, breaking through 3 bots at once. Kor charged like a bull, knocking one mech into a pile of wreckage. Then he saw Nyari, and his eyes locked onto her. She froze, unable to move. Jace screamed, "Night, ha!" and fired his shock rifle. But it wasn't enough. Kor reached out and slammed Jace into a wall. The rifle shattered, and Jace collapsed. Coughing blood, Nyari crawled to him. "Please," she cried. "Stay awake," Jace smiled weakly. "It's okay," he said. "You know what to do." Tears fell from her eyes as she pulled out the device he gave her. She stood up slowly, looking at the machines still fighting. Then she pressed the button across the junkyard. Every bot received the signal. Old cores activated, weapons recharged, targeting systems snapped into place. Even the broken ones moved again. The junkyard roared to life like a beast woken from sleep. The soldiers backed away, but it was too late. The machines surrounded them with heavy steps and glowing eyes. The trap had worked, but the cost was high. Nyari dropped beside Jace again. Holding his face in her hands, "You saved me again," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "You're the light now," he said, before passing out, and in the distance. Sirens began to rise. More were coming, but this time they wouldn't find just a blind girl and a fugitive. They would find a fire, ready to burn. The junkyard was burning. Smoke rose like black ghosts into the dim sky. Sparks flew as warbeds moved through the wreckage, their heavy feet shaking the ground. Every system that had been forgotten now pulsed. With life, the old machines had awoken and they remembered everything. Nyari knelt beside Jace, her hands covered in dust and blood. His face was pale, breath shallow, but he was still alive. She touched his chest gently, whispering, "Please, don't leave me." All around her, the warbits formed a protective ring, shielding them from the soldiers. But the battle wasn't over yet. A broken bot limped over to her, missing half its head. Its voice crackled with static. "Unit 17 requesting." Instruction. Nyari blinked, then slowly stood up, her hands shaking. She looked at the machines. 10, maybe 15, standing like a small army, and for the first time they looked at her, not through her. "My name is Nyari," she said. "Protect this man." The bot's eyes turned blue in unison. "Confirmed," they replied. "Engineer." Priority. High inside the junkyard walls, the enemy regrouped. Rek wiped ash from his armor, staring at the machines that refused to die. "Unacceptable," he growled. That girl controls them. Mezen was bleeding from the leg, his drone sparking and falling from the sky. Lutha had burns along her side, her stealth systems broken. Kor had a bent metal plate over one eye but still stood tall. We can't win here, Mezen said. Coughing, Rek's eyes narrowed. We're not leaving without the visor. But the girl has the bots, Lutha hissed. She turned them against us. Rek stared at the horizon, his hand tightening around a red chip on his belt. Then, we rewrite the battlefield, he said, back in the command shed. Niari dragged Jace's body onto the medical table. The room was filled with dust, shattered screens, and broken memory cores. She opened the table and gasped, no power. She looked at the visor, still glowing faintly on his head. Then she made a choice. She pulled it off and connected it to the med table. The light faded from her world instantly, and darkness returned, but the machine hummed to life, reading the visor's data and transferring it into the core. The healing process began, but it was slow, too slow. Niari reached for the table edge and stood up, her legs shaking. She couldn't see, but she could hear the bots outside, ready to fight again. She walked outside blindly, her hand touching the wall for guidance. When she stepped into the light, the bots turned to her. Commander Niari, one said. She blinked, unsure. I am not a commander. The bot replied, you woke the memory core. We follow your signal now. Rek watched from above. Whispering into his comm, target in the open, he threw the red chip into the air. It exploded in a wave of static jamming signals. Cracking control systems, confusing bots. Suddenly, the warbits began to hesitate, their movements stuttering. Niari felt the change instantly. She tried to speak, but the bots didn't respond. She reached toward the nearest one, but it stepped back, eyes flickering red. They're losing control. She said, panic rising, inside the bunker. The med table's hum grew louder. Jace's hand twitched. His eyes fluttered open. Niari, he whispered. Where are you? Then he saw her outside alone, surrounded by machines going dark. He pulled himself off the table, tearing off wires. Blood still fresh on his shirt, he grabbed the backup chip from the wall and limped outside. Override Kodako Sigma. 12, he shouted. The machines paused, confused. Jace held up the chip, his voice breaking. This girl is your new engineer. Her orders are mine. The bots scanned the chip, their eyes turning white, then blue. The red signal died. Rek's jammer failing, Mezen cursed loudly. Throwing a broken drone at the wall, Rek growled. Fine, if we can't take the visor. We'll take her. He rushed forward with Kor behind him. They charged through the scrap piles like monsters. Niari turned her head, hearing them. Coming, Jace tried to step forward, but his leg gave out. Nair, run. He shouted, but she didn't run. She took a deep breath, opened her hands, and called out. Defense formation circle mode. The bots responded instantly, surrounding her in a perfect ring. Weapons pointed outward. Rek and Kor crashed into the circle and were met with raw power. Shockwaves blasted the ground. Metal arms punched with the force of tanks. One bot tackled Kor, dragging him into a pile of blades. Rek fought fiercely, slicing two bots apart with a plasma blade. But they kept coming, overwhelming him, forcing him back. Niari stood in the center, eyes closed, trusting the machines. Jace reached her side, breathing hard. You're incredible, he said. She smiled weakly. I can't see anymore, but I've never felt stronger. Suddenly, a new alarm rang from above. Jace looked up, his face turning pale. That's an orbital signal, Niari whispered. What does it mean? It means, Jace said grimly, they're bringing down the fire. The sky turned red. And the real storm was about to begin. Asterisk, the sky above the junkyard cracked open like glass. Flames shimmered in the clouds, red and gold streaks spiraling down from the stars. Jace stared upward in silence, the air buzzing with static and heat. An orbital strike was coming, and they had only minutes left. Nyari stood beside him, blind. Once more but calm, she reached out and held his hand tightly. "They're really going to burn everything, aren't they?" she asked. Jace nodded slowly. "They don't care what's down here. They can't get the visor, they'll erase it. Behind them." Warbits gathered in a circle, some damaged, some barely standing. Their glowing eyes dimmed as they detected the energy from above. They were strong, but not strong enough to fight a weapon from orbit. Jace turned and began running toward the hidden workbench. He pulled wires, chips, and a glowing blue orb from the shelves. Nyari followed the sound, her voice steady. "What are you doing?" "Changing the visor's core," he said quickly. "I'm going to make it broadcast a fake signal, loud and far. They'll think it's been moved across the sector." Nyari frowned. "But won't they still fire if they think we're down here?" Jace paused, hesitating for a moment. Then he looked her in the eyes. Even if hers couldn't see him anymore. "No," he said softly. "If they think the visor's on the move, they'll send soldiers instead of fire. But someone has to carry the signal away from here." She felt her chest tighten. "You mean one of us has to run?" Jace nodded. "It should be me." Nyari clenched her fists. "You're still hurt, Jace. I'm the fugitive," he said, with a bitter smile. "They're already hunting me. But you? You're more than what they think." He walked to her, holding out a small chip. "This will override the visor's signal path and redirect it through my CUM ID. They'll follow me, not you." She shook her head. "I won't let you die alone." But Jace leaned down, touching her cheek gently. "You gave me something worth protecting," he said. "I was just a man hiding from his past. Then you showed me a future worth running toward." Nyari felt the tears come again. "Even without sight, promise me," she said, her voice shaking. "You'll survive." Jace laughed quietly. "I'll do my best." Outside, the bots began to break apart old vehicles, forming a crude carrier platform. Jace handed them a core battery and the modified transmitter. "Take this as far east as you can, away from the city," he ordered. "Run it on autopilot." One bot stepped forward, larger than the others, its chest dented from the last fight. "Engineer," it said. "We will obey." It lifted the transmitter and powered on, sprinting across the junkyard like thunder. The fake signal flared to life loud, confusing, convincing, high above, in the orbiting command ship. Alarms rang. "New signal detected," said the officer. "Location moved, grid 7 east." The commander raised an eyebrow. "Cancel fire, redirect soldiers to intercept." Jace saw the clouds begin to clear, the burning trails vanishing. He fell to his knees, exhausted but smiling. "It worked," he whispered. Nyari reached down and pulled him to his feet. "I told you not to die," she said, holding him tight. But it wasn't over yet. Rek watched from a ruined building. His face twisted with rage. The signal was a lie. He growled, "She's still here? We end this now." Kor and Lutha joined him. Weapons ready. The warbets, already weakened, tried to block them, but they were too slow. The soldiers charged through the defenses, heading straight for Jace and Nyari. Jace turned and raised his broken rifle. Firing a desperate shot, Kor dodged it easily and tackled him to the ground. Lutha grabbed Nyari, slamming her against a metal crate. "You blinded me with light," she hissed. "Let's see how you handle the dark." But Nyari fought back, her hands finding a broken pipe. She swung it hard, hitting Lutha in the knee. Then again in the side. Lutha screamed, dropping her. Nyari crawled to Jace. But Rek was already standing over him. Rek's blade glowed bright red, aimed at Jace's chest. "You should have let her rot in the dark," Rek snarled. "She was never supposed to see." Niara screamed, "No!" She jumped in between them, shielding Jace with her body, but before the blade struck, something happened. A high-pitched sound filled the air. The visor still connected to the med core glowed brightly. Its energy surged outward in a flash of blue light. Rex stumbled back, his systems glitching. And in that moment, Niari opened her eyes. She saw Rex's face, twisted with shock. She saw Jace below her, bruised and breathing. She saw the junkyard around her blurry. "But real, I can see," she whispered. "It wasn't just the visor. It changed me." Rex tried to recover, but it was too late. The remaining bots rose one last time, pushing him and the others back. Core shouted for retreat, dragging Rex with him. They vanished into the smoke. Jace looked up at her, barely conscious. You saw me?" he said, smiling through pain. Niari nodded, holding him close. "I'll never stop seeing you now." And as the junkyard fell silent, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Light touched the rusted metal and broken machines. And for the first time, Niari saw the world with her own eyes. Asterisk smoke drifted gently through the junkyard ruins. Broken metal lay in every corner, some still glowing with heat. The sun was rising now, slowly stretching light across the piles of scrap and rust, and Niari saw it, not through a visor, not through machines, but with her own eyes, the color of light, the shape of shadows, the way the sky changed from orange to blue. All of it hers to see. She stood barefoot on the cool metal floor, her hair messy, her face scratched, but her eyes wide open. "I can see," she whispered again, as if reminding herself it wasn't a dream. Behind her, Jace lay on a torn blanket, breathing shallow but alive. He opened his eyes slowly and smiled when he saw her. "You're glowing," he said softly. She knelt beside him, holding his hand. "You almost died," she whispered. He smirked. "Would have been worth it." The Warbits stood around them. In silence, some were missing arms, others had sparks shooting from their joints. But they were alive in a way machines aren't supposed to be. One of them stepped forward and spoke. "Engineer Jace." "Vision Command Niari. What are your new instructions?" Niari looked at them, surprised. "I'm not a commander," she said. The bot's eyes glowed blue. "You gave us purpose. You spoke to our memories. You are more than a commander." Jace grunted as he sat up. Still weak, he looked at Niari and nodded. "They're yours now," he said. "You woke them?" She turned to the machines, then to the rising sun. For the first time in her life, she felt something strange: freedom. Not just freedom from darkness, but freedom from being forgotten. Rex and his soldiers were gone. Their transmission was cut. Their mission failed. But Jace knew the peace wouldn't last. "They'll send more," he said. "Maybe stronger. Maybe smarter. But they'll come." Niari stood tall, her eyes now clear and bright. "Then we'll be ready," she said. Jace raised an eyebrow. "We?" She smiled. "You think I'm letting you go now?" They walked through the junkyard together, side by side. Machines followed them like silent guards. They passed old memory cores, burnt wings, broken glass, and the trail of what they had survived. In the center of the yard, Niari found the crushed pieces of the visor. She knelt and picked them up, holding the fragments in her palm. "It was never just this," she said. "It was hope." Jace came beside her, placing his hand on hers. "And now, you are the hope." A soft worry sound echoed from above. Niari looked up and saw a small ship descending slowly. Its lights flashed in a soft patterned civilian medical transport. The rebels had answered Jace's emergency beacon, finally. The ship landed carefully on the flattest part of the yard. A group of medics stepped out to humans, one Drelv, and a tall green-skinned healer with cybernetic arms. They rushed too, Jace scanning his vitals and lifting him onto a hoverbed. Niari stepped back, unsure. One of the medics looked at her, puzzled. "You're the signal carrier?" Niari hesitated. No, I'm the reason he built it. The medic stared at her, then smiled softly. Then you're the reason this story matters. They gave her clean clothes, a warm drink, and a small medical patch for the bruise on her shoulder. Still, she couldn't stop looking at Jace as they lifted him into the ship. He reached out and grabbed her hand, his grip weak but firm. "Come with me," he said. She nodded without thinking. Inside the ship, the medic set to work, but Nyari stayed. Close, she watched stars appear on the view screen as they lifted higher. And then silence, not the silence of fear or loneliness, but peace. Where will we go? She asked him later. Jace chuckled. Anywhere the stars allow, we'll build again, smarter this time. We'll protect others, like you. Nyari looked down at her hands that had once fumbled in darkness. Now they held light. Now they held purpose. She turned to one of the medics. "Can I ask a favor?" "Yes, of course. I want to learn," she said. "Engineering, communication, defense, all of it." Jace looked at her, his eyes soft. "You really want to follow this path?" She smiled. "No, I want to lead it." As the ship left the atmosphere, the camera feed showed the junkyard one last time. The bots stood still, guarding it like a sacred place. And then it vanished into the clouds. Far above, Nyari stared into the stars, her eyes full of wonder. Not fear. She had been blind, forgotten, hunted. But now she saw everything, and she knew this was only the beginning. A girl once left in darkness, now carried the light.